Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, 7 Secrets to End-of-Year Fundraising Success. My name is Christina Goggery-Campbell, and I'm the Director of Strategic Communications at Independent Sector, a diverse community of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure that all people in the United States thrive. This webinar is brought to you by Independent Sector and Prosper Strategies, the leading marketing and communications consultancy for the nonprofit sector. I'm joined here today by Alyssa Conrardy, President of Prosper Strategies, and our special guest, Noreen Castor, a nonprofit collaborator and strategist who has led fundraising efforts for the Robert R. McCormick Foundation and Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago. Hi, Noreen and Alyssa.
Hello.
Hi. Many of you have joined us for earlier webinars from Prosper Strategies in their Nonprofit Marketing Manifesto series. If that's you, welcome back. And if you're new to our webinars, welcome. Today, however, we're taking a break from the Manifesto webinar series to bring you a webinar on a timely topic, end-of-year fundraising. If you're not already thinking about end-of-year fundraising, now is the time to start. We can't wait to have this important discussion, so I'll turn it over to Alyssa.
All right. Thank you so much, Christina, and welcome, everyone. We're really excited to be here with you today, and thank you, Noreen, for joining us as our guest for today's webinar. Before we dive in, we'd like to take just a moment, as usual, to help you orient yourselves and go to webinar and greet some of you on the line. So please go ahead and find the questions box and just introduce yourselves. We'd love to have you type in your name, your organization name, your title, and where you're calling in from. Go ahead and wait for some of those to come in. All right. We always have a little delay and then they pour in, so I'll start to read off some of the names. Annalise Rhines, Assistant to the Executive Director in Middleton, Wisconsin, from the Wisconsin Retired Educators Association, was first to introduce herself. Welcome. We have Kevin from One Hope United, Marketing Manager from Chicago. Let's see, we have Hallie, hopefully I'm pronouncing your name right, Hallie Anderson from Walla Walla, Washington, Blue Mountain Humane Society, Marketing and PR Coordinator. Taniela at NABU in New York. Shelley from the Victim Center, Director of Development and Marketing. Mary Lou Wiley with CD International in Minneapolis. Nikki Kruger, Director of Development at Pines and Prairies Land Trust in Texas. Sarah from Federal Way, Washington, missed your organization name. We have Samantha Benedict from Muttville Senior Dog Rescue. She's the Development Coordinator. Danny, Marketing Manager at Chick Tech, headquartered out of Portland, Oregon. Many more of you continuing to pour in here and introduce yourselves. We're well over 100 attendees on the webinar now, so thank you all. And sorry if I didn't get to all of your names, but it would take up all of our time here today. So welcome. Thank you for joining us. Since you found the questions box, keep that at the top of your screen. You can use the questions box throughout today's webinar to ask questions of myself and of Noreen, both of us. I'll keep an eye on the questions box throughout today's webinar and answer as many of your questions as we can at the conclusion of today's session in the last 15 minutes or so. So now that some of you have introduced yourselves, we'd like to take just a moment to introduce ourselves and our organizations. And I'll start with that. As Christina mentioned, I'm Alyssa Conrardy, the President of Prosper Strategies. Many of you have probably been on our past webinars, but for those of you who aren't yet familiar, we're a Chicago-based marketing firm that works exclusively with nonprofits on marketing and brand strategy and implementation. And through that work, just sort of by nature of how interrelated communications and fundraising are, we collaborate really frequently with fundraising and development. And that's exactly how Noreen and I got to know each other. Last year, Noreen was working as the Associate Development Director at the McCormick Foundation, one of the largest foundations in Chicago, and she and her team hired our firm to collaborate with them on the strategy and messaging, creative execution for the foundation's communities programs end-of-year fundraising campaign. We'll get into that a whole lot more in just a few minutes, but Noreen, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Noreen Castor, and I'm really excited to be with you all today. I've been a nonprofit for 13 years, and during that time, I've created, managed, and executed numerous multi-channel solicitation, acquisition, and stewardship campaigns via all different channels. And in doing so, I've learned how to use fundraising, marketing, and data in ways that complement each other to engage donors and prospects and get them to donate and take action. I've also learned how to think methodically through logistics to keep all the moving parts on track and within budget while striving to keep these processes inclusive. While at the McCormick Foundation, I collaborated with my colleagues and established a great partnership with Prosper, and we all worked together to develop well thought out and successful strategies, plans, and fundraising campaigns. Currently, I just started a position with Feeding America, where I have a really exciting opportunity to work with food banks in our network to thoughtfully build on their strengths to help put them on a sustainable track for success.
Thanks so much, Noreen. I can't wait to dig into this topic with you more today, and I know our audience is going to learn so much from you. I know I've learned so much from working with you, so let's go ahead and jump into our content. Here's our agenda for today's webinar. As you know, because the title of this webinar sort of gives it away, we are going to share with you today the 7 secrets that we believe you must master to achieve your full potential for end-of-year fundraising success. We will dive into exactly what those secrets are in just a minute, and as we work our way through them, we are going to share a bunch of real-world examples with you from the campaign that Noreen and I worked on together at the McCormick Foundation, and Noreen will be speaking a bit to her past experience at Lurie Children's as well. I, in turn, will be speaking to Prosper's experience with our other nonprofit clients, and hopefully will give you a good, well-rounded understanding of what end-of-year fundraising success can look like at organizations sort of large and small or anywhere in between. And as we discuss these 7 secrets, we're going to focus on best practice examples and sort of ideal scenarios as a starting point. But we also really want to get practical about ways that organizations that have less budget for their end-of-year fundraising or fundraising overall can prioritize to make a maximum impact. And then as we get toward the end of today's webinar, I want to be really transparent about this upfront. We are going to share with you how you can work with Prosper Strategies if you need help on your end-of-year fundraising. We'll share a special offer for our 3 new fundraising packages with you and kind of discuss behind the scenes what it looks like to work with us within those 3 packages. Our goal here today is really to pack a ton of value into this webinar and make it super helpful for everyone on the line, whether you choose to work with us now or in the future on your fundraising or not. So just want to be really clear that this webinar is not a sales pitch. We are going to share with you ways that you can work with us, but you should get a lot of value even if that's not your intention now or later. Also want to say that if you already have your end-of-year campaign in motion this year and it's just not a good time to, or you can't financially invest in support, you can think about what we're sharing in today's webinar, specifically when we get to how you can work with Prosper from the perspective of how can we improve next year and what should we be budgeting for next year. So hopefully this brings a lot of value to your team from all of those perspectives. And then as we mentioned, we'll wrap up today's webinar by taking questions from the audience. So feel free to pop those into the questions box anytime. I'll be monitoring it and I'll ask for them again at the end. We will also share with you our next upcoming webinar. We have 2 this month, so stay tuned for that and make sure you're signed up for it at the end of today's webinar. Ready to dive in, Noreen?
Let's do it.
All right.
All right, great. So the first of the 7 secrets to end-of-year fundraising success is to start early and to begin by auditing past performance. If you work in fundraising and development, you already know how critical the end of the year is for charitable giving. But did you know that more than 50% of nonprofits receive a majority of their annual donations in the last 3 months of the year? And did you know that 31% of all charitable annual giving occurs in December? Now, we know that a majority of nonprofits don't and maybe just can't start planning their end-of-year appeals until October for various reasons. But because of the importance of a year-end campaign from the revenue and exposure side, Alyssa and I think October is just a little bit too late. And right now, the beginning of September is the absolute latest you'll want to start planning your campaign if you want to maximize your chances of success, and actually the earlier the better. When I was at Lurie Children's and at the McCormick Foundation, we started in January. Now don't worry, it wasn't planning in the sense that we were working on specific tactics. This is the time that we took to review the data and the results and do the analysis, since all the end-of-year campaign information was fresh in our minds. But if you haven't started planning your campaign yet, don't worry. The secrets we're about to share today will help you get moving. Now, the best way to begin your planning process is by auditing the performance of the campaign you just did to the previous year's campaigns. This is always where I like to start because it informs so much about the approach for the whole upcoming year. So when you audit and analyze your data, you're looking at your typical results metrics like dollars raised, number of donors, renewal rate, channel response rate, open and unsubscribe rates. But you also want to go a bit deeper with your audit, depending on how much time and data you have. By digging into your data, you'll be taking a really critical step that will help your next campaign be more efficient and effective. So we recommend you take a look at the performance of your emails, direct mail, social media content, donation page variations, advertising, and events. You might also want to dig deeper to understand if donors reacted particularly strongly to specific stories or key messages, or even if there was a specific donor segment that really outperformed others. And it's also really important to try and understand how aligned or misaligned your past fundraising campaign was with your organization's overall messaging. For example, if you look at your appeal letters side by side with your website, brochure, or case for support, does the voice and messaging feel consistent, like it's coming from one united organization? If not, that might be an area to work on improving. As you audit these areas, you're really just aiming to get a better sense of what worked well and should be built upon, what worked poorly and should be discontinued, and what really kind of fell in the middle, things you're not so sure about that you'd want to test further. So once you've audited your past campaigns as much as you can, it's a good idea to summarize your key findings so you don't get in the state of analysis paralysis. Just ask yourself, what are your most important findings that can influence the success of next year's campaign, and then write them down so you'll be able to refer back to them often. So taking all this theory, let's talk about how it played out in a real-life example. In the case of our work with the McCormick Foundation last year, we found that there was a big misalignment between the new strength-based grant-making approach our program had adopted and the way we were communicating in our fundraising materials. Our program started focusing its grant-making on the potential that lives in the communities that we were working with and how they could be further strengthened through investments. Yet our fundraising messaging from previous years was needs and deficit-based, which painted a real inaccurate picture of people who were without any means. We knew we wanted our future campaigns to be more in line with the direction and the positivity of our grant-making approach, while still pulling on the heartstrings of donors and highlighting stories of people they would want to help. We also found that in past year's campaigns, donations were primarily coming from our long-standing existing donor base. We were pulling very few new donors into the fold every year. This was especially problematic, not because we were experiencing regular donor attrition, but our donor base skewed towards an older demographic that was continuing to age. And finally, we found that there was potential to expand and grow with our digital tactics. We noticed more of our donors were giving via email, especially our Giving Tuesday emails. So we wanted to take advantage of that via donor segmentation strategies and messaging. Also, some of our test efforts around social media we did the previous year had yielded some very preliminary indications that we could be successful both in reaching new donor prospects and acquiring new donors on social media. But we knew we needed to invest a lot more in social media in the upcoming year to start to see it bear fruit. Having these insights as we planned our 2018 campaign really guided us and put us on a path that led to success. So when you're looking at your results and analysis, see what three key findings bubble up, and remember to keep those at the top of your mind as you move forward.
I agree. Those key findings are really what focused us when we began our work together on deciding how to proceed and what to do next with the 2018 end-of-year campaign for the McCormick Foundation's Communities program. And that brings us to our second secret, which is to make campaign planning a true priority. So once we had our heads around insights like the ones that Noreen just shared, we moved into a period where we were really only focused on planning and strategizing for the campaign year ahead. And I can't suggest that enough if it's possible at your organization to have that focus on planning. I know it can be tempting to dive right in and start concepting or even writing your appeal letters, but really taking the time to step back and look at the big picture, get a coordinated roadmap in place, and ensure that all of the efforts you're planning work toward the same goals is a huge key to the success of your campaign. So you might be wondering what a plan for an end-of-year campaign should include. And that, of course, depends on how robust your campaign is going to be. But typically we recommend the sections that you're seeing here on your screen, and I'll explain each of these a little bit. The first is the campaign theme. We're going to come back to that in a moment, so don't worry if you don't know quite what that means. That should be outlined in your campaign plan. The second section is key messages. These are the most important things you want to emphasize in your campaign that you want to have come through in your materials. Third section is campaign tactics. This is where you define what channels your campaign is going to use, from the basics like email and direct mail to advertising, and how you're going to use those tactics to achieve your goals. Fourth section is campaign timeline, where you define what's happening when. The fifth section that we like to include in plans is campaign targeting and segmentation. This is where you define who your campaign is going to reach and how you're going to segment different communications to speak more directly to specific audiences. We then look at the sixth section, campaign responsibilities, where you define who is handling what. Seventh section, we suggest including goals and metrics, where you outline what you're looking to achieve and how you'll measure it. And then last, but certainly not least, for any of you who have been responsible for managing this in the past, is the campaign budget. Your campaign plan should absolutely outline how much you'll spend outside of the cost of your immediate team that's on your payroll, and how those funds will be distributed, where they're coming from. You'll want to take that into consideration as you think about the return on any investments you make into your campaign. You can see here some example pages from our campaign plan for the McCormick Foundation. You can see objectives, tactical selections, details about what we were going to do with each tactic, our campaign calendar and scorecard, just some pages from within that plan. Planning, I know, can be a little bit overwhelming, but if you're at a loss for where to start and need some inspiration, I'd actually suggest downloading our Essential Nonprofit Marketing Plan template. That's available for download on our site. The link is here on your screen, as well as in the chat box. It can actually be a really great starting point, even though it is a marketing plan template, not a fundraising plan template, because most of the suggestions that we make in that template, sections that we suggest including it, are actually applicable both to a fundraising plan and a marketing plan. There's really a lot of overlap. After you've developed a plan that you feel good about, you'll want to share it with your campaign team for their thoughts and feedback. And that brings us to our next secret.
That's right. Secret number 3 is to assemble a dream team made up of all the roles you're going to need to bring your end-of-year campaign to life. It's so important to have the right roles and people in place to make your campaign a success, and to involve them early in the planning and kickoff meetings. Every organization is a little different, but in an ideal world, a campaign dream team would include all the following roles, even if one person plays quite a few of these roles and wears multiple hats. The first is the campaign manager. This is the person on the front lines of your campaign who's coordinating everyone else and making sure everything goes off without a hitch. Ideally, the end-of-year campaign is one of this person's primary job responsibilities. Well, at McCormick, that was me. Next is your data analytics manager. This is the person who tracks all your campaign metrics on a regular basis and reports them to the team. They're also the person responsible for pulling lists and managing segmentation in your database. The next two are pretty self-explanatory, a copywriter and a designer. The copywriter writes all the copy for your appeal letters, donation landing pages, emails, social media posts. And this can sometimes make sense to outsource to an agency like Prosper. While the designer designs the campaign creative, so the look and the design of the piece. And this role too can also make sense to outsource. Next is a relationship builder. They're responsible for cultivating relationships and stewarding donors all year round. Involving your engagement officer in your planning will help you decide if and when to include major donors in certain end-of-year campaign solicitations. You can also work together to create a process of informing them when major gifts do come in through direct mail or email, so they're aware of this timely stewardship opportunity. Now moving on to administrative support. This is really important because at the end of the year, this is when gifts and inquiries spike and time is of the essence. You'll want to have someone on your team, or even hire a temp, who's dedicated to gift processing and acknowledgments, uploading, cleaning data, taking gifts over the phone and answering questions, and taking care of unsubscribes. This work is so important because this is where the details live that make or break a positive donor experience. And next is the execution team. These are the people who bring things to life, like your social media posts, emails, and ads. putting the content into the right tools, publishing it, and monitoring it to make sure that the message go out at the right time. And certainly, last but not least, is the approval team. You're probably going to need a designated group to serve as your approval team to provide the final sign-off on all materials before they go to your donor list. People on this team will kind of depend on the structure and the dynamics of your organization, but it often includes your CEO or your marketing or communications director or the development director. It's important to note that that you'll be more successful if these people are invested in the work from the beginning and the planning stages and truly understand your campaign strategy. And that's really true of all the members of your campaign team. The more you can involve everyone from the beginning, the better. And as you assemble this dream team, really think about the skills and capacity you have in-house and what you need to outsource. And be cognizant of the other work outside of this campaign work that colleagues may have on their plate so the work doesn't become overwhelming. And if internal bandwidth is really thin and the work that needs to be done is a priority, then outsourcing would be the way to go. It actually can be a cost saver and a huge time saver to outsource certain parts of your campaign to freelancers or an agency that can fill the gaps on your team. In our case, we brought Prosper in to help us first strategically as we work through the challenges of syncing up our messaging with our grant-making approach and to help build out our plan. And then tactically, to write and design our direct mail and email appeals and social posts, and to implement the digital aspects of our campaign like social ads and Google ads. It really was invaluable to us to have a fresh outside perspective and have a few extra hands on deck since we knew we were doing and wanting to accomplish a lot.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, one of the biggest areas where we helped up front, at least, was with developing a campaign theme, which brings us right to secret number 4. Develop a campaign theme and use stories to your advantage. And when we say campaign theme, what we mean is the big idea that gets woven into all of your campaign touch points, from your emails to your social media posts to your direct mail appeals. This theme should be compelling, creative, and attention-grabbing, and it should align with the most important key messages that you want to communicate in your campaign. It's important to revisit this theme every year to keep your communications to donors and prospective donors fresh. It can be tempting to think we'll just reuse last year's campaign theme again, but we typically advise against that and think that a firm like Prosper can be very helpful in keeping themes fresh. I think a campaign theme is better understood in practice than in theory. So let's take a look at the one that we developed for the McCormick Foundation, which you're seeing on your screen here now. So based on the insights from previous campaigns and the research we conducted, we knew that we wanted 2018's campaign to take a more strengths-oriented tone that aligned with the way the Communities program was approaching its grant making, which Noreen spoke about a little bit at the beginning of this webinar. We also knew that we wanted to move toward discussing the racial equity lens through which the foundation and the Communities program specifically had begun to view its work. But we had some hesitations about coming on too strong with this in a way that would alienate donors who weren't necessarily used to hearing about it frequently. So with some of those insights in mind, we landed on a campaign concept that we called Our Chicago, Our Opportunity. You can see examples of the mood boards we used to explore this campaign concept here, and I'll explain it a little bit. So the concept focused on stories of opportunities experienced by the program participants or beneficiaries of services of several of the foundation's grantees. The stories that we used came from the Greater Chicago Food Depository, Beyond the Ball, Teamwork Inglewood, and Enlace, all local organizations here in the Chicago area. And engaging program participants of these organizations in telling their own stories was critical to our campaign concept, especially given that the McCormick Foundation's Communities program's new grant-making approach really emphasized the importance of community voice. However, I think that it's not just unique to them. Storytelling is really critical to any campaign, and engaging the community voice and telling those stories is absolutely the way to go, if possible. In the McCormick Foundation's case, we gathered stories through 2 days of interviews, photo shoots, and video shoots with a videographer, which would allow us to weave their narratives through all campaign touchpoints. But you don't necessarily have to go to such great lengths to make stories a part of your campaign. A similar concept, or one that makes use of stories, can work in a lot of different ways. So talk about that a little bit here. If you want to use stories to your advantage in your campaign, but you don't have the resources to do something quite so robust as what I just described with video and major photo shoots, you can absolutely start with what you already have. You can begin by asking your program staff to share stories of the people they interact with every day, and they probably have dozens. Or you can consider how to turn data that already lives in documents like your grant applications or your annual reports into stories. For example, you might mine data from your annual report to do some social math and describe how you accomplished a specific outcome with a certain amount of funding last year, and how you can increase that impact if you hit your fundraising goal this year. It's best to pair that sort of data and social math with at least some storytelling, even if that storytelling is just theoretical, like saying something along the lines of, imagine a child who is experiencing homelessness, and then sort of painting a more general picture. You can also make story gathering a requirement for staff in certain roles, if that's appropriate within how your organization is structured, or provide incentives to those who do it. If you can, try to gather stories all year round, not just at campaign time. That will make your list during the campaign season that much lighter, and take at least one thing off your plate so that you can focus on making your materials and campaign strategy the best they can be. Also want to mention that if possible, you should also aim to gather stories from as many different types of people that your organization works with as you possibly can. That will allow you to take many different directions with your campaign, paint a more complete picture of the diversity of the communities and populations you serve, and ultimately appeal to many different types of donors. However you choose to gather stories, though, make sure that you're seeking the necessary permissions to use names and imagery or protecting identities where needed. And of course, we always suggest running the stories you choose to use by the people and communities reflected in them. And this actually goes to the topic of our next webinar later this month a little bit. There's really nothing worse than exploiting the people you hope to help just to pull on a donor's heartstrings. And the best way to know if you're representing the people you work with in a way that feels true to them is simply to ask them and engage them in the process. So here you can see a couple of examples of the people and organizations we gathered stories about for the McCormick Foundation's end of year campaign. These are individuals that participate in programs from 3 of the McCormick Foundation's grantees. And on this next screen, you can see how we wove those stories through some of our different pieces of campaign collateral, an example of how they were woven into direct mail, video, and social media content.
Well, great. And stories really were definitely a cornerstone of every part of our campaign, including Giving Tuesday, which actually brings us to our next secret, make the most of Giving Tuesday. While some folks in the sector believe Giving Tuesday is oversaturated with appeals, the data doesn't lie. Charitable giving on Giving Tuesday grew over 38% between 2017 and 2018, totaling $380 million. The trick here is to find a way to stand out in the Giving Tuesday crowd and to make the most of this important day for fundraising. One smart strategy to offer is to offer a match during Giving Tuesday so that donors can see their dollars go further. This is a strategy that you'll want to pursue. If this is a strategy that you'll want to pursue, you'll want to start to look early for a donor or partner to sponsor the match so that you can pull out all the necessary stops to promote it. This is exactly what we did with the McCormick Foundation in 2018. At the foundation, we were really fortunate to be able to offer 50% match year-round. So to make our offer for Giving Tuesday special, we increased our match to 100% on every dollar raised to a certain amount. To make the most out of this offer, we started our promotion for Giving Tuesday a whole week before, which proved to be a good way to get ahead and be top of mind of our donors. Not only did we start early, but we promoted it heavily. We teased it in the days leading up to Giving Tuesday via 2 emails and posts on social media. And on the Tuesday of Giving Tuesday, we sent 2 different emails throughout the day, which coincided with the real-time social updates about the progress towards our Giving Tuesday goal. All that resulted in an over 300% increase in dollars raised on Giving Tuesday over the previous year, from around $20,000 raised on Giving Tuesday in 2017 to $75,000 raised on Giving Tuesday in 2018. And when we dug into the data here, we found that about 20% of the money raised on Giving Tuesday was actually from our lapsed donors, so it really proved to be a great way to reactivate our donor base. I also want to note here that we built in a stewardship touchpoint the day after for those who gave to our Giving Tuesday campaign. To keep the momentum and to keep our donors in the know, the Wednesday after, we sent a thank you email, which is on the right here of our screen, to those donors to not only thank them again, but to share the results of how much we raised during our whole Giving Tuesday campaign. Now, the strategy certainly isn't one that works only for foundations that can provide their own match. Many nonprofits, from Boys and Girls Club to Habitat for Humanity, have secured matching sponsors for Giving Tuesday and have seen great success with that approach as well. It's always an added bonus if you can line up corporate sponsors with a large following who will promote your Giving Tuesday campaign and the match among their own customers and community members. We've shared a link in the chat to a blog from Classy about securing sponsors. That's a great follow-up read after this webinar. And even if you don't have a sponsor or a match, don't ignore Giving Tuesday. It's likely to give your end-of-year campaign a lift, even if all you do is send a few emails and post on social.
And that brings us to our sixth secret for success, which we can't emphasize enough, and that is to make the donor experience as seamless as you possibly can. The secret is all about making sure you're paying attention to the little things that are so easy to overlook, but can really make or break the way a donor feels about giving to your organization. So we want to highlight just a few best practices for making that donor experience seamless. Our first tip here, which often gets overlooked, is to make sure that all of your materials have a complementary look and feel from a design perspective. So Noreen alluded to this a little bit earlier, but an example is if your donor receives an appeal letter with a certain hero image in the header, it's really ideal to use that same hero image at the top of your donation page so that a donor who reads the letter and then might go online to give knows that they're in the right place. This also, of course, just gives an impression of an organization that is polished and professional and hopefully will be a good steward of the donation. Second tip is to make sure you have an online donation form with your campaign and an easy to type in URL that goes to the donation page. Remember that not everyone who ends up on your donation page will end up there by clicking a link. Some people might type the URL in directly, even if they received a direct mail piece first that got them there, and you want to make it as easy for them as possible. Increasingly, donors are choosing to give online even when they receive direct mail appeals, just because it's becoming so much easier and so much more of the norm. And as donors get more digitally savvy and younger, they're becoming more and more inclined to forgo writing a check and mailing it in. They want that donation page. They want to be able to give from their phone, from their computer, their iPad on the fly, and you want to make that as easy as possible for them. It's ideal to host your donation page at your main site's URL, not a subdomain, and to make sure that whatever comes after the slash is easy to type in. I personally like using simply yoururl.org/donate, but there are, of course, many other options you could align with your campaign theme as well. Our third tip, which seems obvious, but again, often is forgotten, is to make sure you have your IRS tax-exempt determination letter on your website. Many donors will look for this, and making it easy for them to get a tax benefit from their donation will ensure that they aren't held back from giving by something so basic and easy. This is also, of course, especially important for those who are interested in employer matching. And fourth and finally, we can't end this webinar without reminding you to thank your donors early and often. At minimum, you should send an automated thank you email, even if the donor gave online, or a gift receipt if the donor gave via mail. However, there are lots of ways to take your acknowledgement to the next level. We always like to think about things like a personalized thank you note from perhaps the development director or the organization's CEO or president. That could be an especially nice touch for higher value donors if it feels really personal, not just like a form letter. We also recommend, if you can, acknowledging your major donors on social media and here and there telling stories of their motivation for giving, assuming, of course, that you've gotten their permission to do so. And it's especially critical to make sure that your acknowledgement doesn't end at the end of the year. You should plan stewardship communications early in the new year where you can both thank donors and report on the results of their donations. If you have the budget, we recommend at least 2 or 3 stewardship pieces between end-of-year campaigns to keep your donors involved and engaged, but at least one is really something that I would consider an essential and try to make the budget for. And here you can see an example of one of the stewardship pieces that was sent over the summer at the McCormick Foundation, thanking donors and sort of talking about what's next for the Communities program.
Great, so that brings us to our last secret. So once you have your campaign concept firmly in place and a campaign plan in the works, it's time to make sure you're focusing your tactics to make the most out of your budget. The tactics you choose will depend on your budget and your goals. According to a study from Winspire, the most common tactics nonprofits are using in end-of-year campaigns include direct mail, email, digital, and in-person outreach. However, unless you have a very large budget and lots of internal bandwidth, you probably won't be able to make full use of these tactics at the same time, and you'll need to make some intentional choices about your tactical mix to achieve the best results. While direct mail has historically been the main tactic for established or just getting started organizations, the world's changing and we need to choose our tactics for end-of-year fundraising should change too. Donors are becoming more receptive to digital appeals on email and social media, and as Gen X and millennial donors continue to age and give more and more, digital is becoming more important and essential to do. That, combined with the cost effectiveness, flexibility, and trackability of emails is why we suggest prioritizing digital first, specifically email and social media. If you have a bit more to spend, you can consider adding in tactics like social media advertising to reach not only your existing donor base, but new donors as well. Once you have a solid digital campaign in place, you should then put priority on further sophisticating your direct mail program. Now, if you have a little bit more money to spend, one thing we're really excited about now is an approach that we pioneered with Prosper Strategies last year, using Facebook advertising to capture contact information for potential new donors. This can be a great way to build your email list, grow your database, and bring new donors into the fold. We started this process by developing what we called a donor lead capture offer. This offer can be anything that a potential donor would be willing to give over their contact information in order to access and be part of something they see as valuable. In the McCormick Foundation's case, we developed a Give Back Guide, which was a 2-page guide to doing good and giving back in Chicagoland. It highlighted tips like getting involved in local politics, finding opportunities to volunteer in your neighborhood, and of course, donating to the McCormick Foundation Communities Program. We hypothesized that this guide would be of interest to the same people who are likely to donate to the foundation, which were people who cared about making Chicagoland a better place. And really, any organization can come up with a similar offer. For example, an animal shelter might create a guide to helping animals stay safe in cold temperatures, while a nonprofit focused on women's rights might publish a white paper on the state of women in the economy. Now, if you don't want to or can't develop content, a petition like the type you see run on change.org can also work.
Great. And after you have a new donor lead gen offer in place, the next step is to advertise it with calls to action that encourage people to download it. Typically, we like to start with advertising on social media sites. We suggest starting with Facebook and targeting people on that network who've closely matched the profiles of your existing donors or the type of potential donor you most want to reach. Facebook allows you to run an ad type called a lead gen ad that is specifically tailored to getting people to give over their contact information in exchange for some sort of asset, which is exactly what we want to do here. We recommend when you're testing this out, starting with a budget of at least $1,000 and paying per new donor lead acquired. When we say lead acquired, we mean you're getting the contact information for someone who could potentially give to your organization. In the McCormick Foundation's case, we did spend a bit more than this, but we were able to acquire over 1,100 emails for potential new donors in the span of about 3 months. And that was just in their initial test campaign. Once you've gotten the contact information for someone who downloaded your new donor lead gen offer, the real beauty of this concept is that you can drop them into your fundraising email campaign, either right from the beginning of your sequence of emails or at whichever email is up next on the schedule. While many of the contacts who you acquire using a program like this might not turn into donors right away or even this year, some will. And more importantly, you can continue communicating with the rest of them beyond this year to nurture them toward future giving. The strategy really was a game changer for the McCormick Foundation as they were experiencing some donor attrition and had an aging donor base, which I know probably sound like common challenges to many of you on today's webinar. Adding 1,100 new contacts to their list with just a simple 2-page guide and some Facebook ads was really a big step in the right direction. and one that wasn't necessarily expected since the foundation hadn't tried anything like this before, and it is kind of a new approach for many organizations.
Now let's take a moment to talk about direct mail, since I'm sure many nonprofits still consider this channel as their bread and butter. When you're ready to further expand your direct mail program, or if you're new to this channel and ready to add it to the mix, there's just a few best practices to keep in mind. First is to take great care with the copy that you use. It should align with your key messages, communicate your campaign theme in a succinct and compelling way, and more than anything, it should be donor-centric. So focus on what your target donor cares about and will get out of donating to your organization. Keep in mind that this is called direct mail, so you focus on using it as a way to directly speak to your donors and use the word you often. Next, segment your direct mail data by gift level and recency of gift. In copy, remind your donors what their last gift was and build your ask ladder from that. Then on the response device, you can position the pre-filled options for giving amounts based on the segment's capacity to give. You'll be pleasantly surprised how a gift amount reminder, just a little nudge, will help your donors renew or upgrade their support. Our third tip for direct mail is to align the creative in the direct mail drop with what's showing up in your campaigns digitally. So for example, when your first direct mail letter hits mailboxes, make sure the header image on your donation page and the cover image on your Facebook page match the primary image on the direct mail piece. Then change that all up if you do a second direct mail drop. This just gives your donor a sense of continuity and cues them that they're in the right place when they go online to give. And one more tip for those of you incorporating direct mail into your campaign is to start early. This is true for everything related to end-of-year fundraising, but it's especially true when you're planning a robust campaign that you're not able to print in-house. Printers and mail houses have significant lead times during the busy end-of-year season if you go with a vendor that does a lot of business with nonprofits, which is what we definitely recommend. We know we can go on and on about direct mail best practices, but for now, we're just going to include a link in the chat box with 115 more tips for direct mail from fundraising expert Gail Perry that I would absolutely recommend checking out. Now, no matter what you're spending and what tactics you're focusing on, one thing's probably true. There are likely areas where you're not optimizing your investment in the right tactics to maximize your return. That's why I suggest analyzing areas where you can move around funds in order to test new tactics and optimize results. For example, if you've always focused on direct mail, consider replacing one email or one mailing with 3 to 5 emails. You might also forgo creating a different letter for a specific segment in favor for advertising on social media to acquire new donor leads. Or perhaps you can consider mailing only your deep lapsed donors once, but still email them after that. And that really could free up some more funds since those lists tend to be large. And although it might sound counterintuitive, bringing in outside support in the right areas by working with an agency or a contractor can actually be a way to save money, improve your return on investment, and give you a bit more flexibility.
Yeah, I might be a little biased, of course. This is Alyssa, but I totally agree, Noreen. A firm like Prosper can help fill gaps on your team and really importantly bring a level of strategic thinking to your campaign that will help you deliver better results. So if that idea is appealing, or if all of the kind of concepts and tips that we shared today seem overwhelming and you're not sure how you're going to pull off a successful campaign this year, oh my gosh, it's already September, especially with so little time remaining, it might feel a little scary, we can definitely help. So today we're excited to, as I mentioned, launch our brand new fundraising jumpstart packages, which we've created just for nonprofits like yours that need extra support to plan and implement an end-of-year campaign that gets real results. We're offering today 3 different packages that can either supplement your existing end-of-year fundraising efforts or serve as your entire campaign. The first is our Ready package, which focuses on organic digital media. Second, we have our Ready Set package, which focuses on organic and paid digital media. And third, we have our Ready Set Go package, which is our most robust and focuses on organic and paid digital media and direct mail. So you're hitting both the digital and direct mail with that third Ready Set Go package. As you probably picked up on if you've been on past webinars or even just on today's, strategy really is at the heart of our approach at Prosper Strategies. It's even in our name. And it's really where we can add the most value, I think, to your campaign. So that's why all of our packages start with some really important strategic components. They each include an audit of your past campaigns and marketing materials to determine what's working and what needs to be improved, a campaign theme, which you'll remember we covered in secret number 4, key messages, a campaign strategy, really critically important, and then a metrics dashboard to help you measure campaign success. These things are included no matter which Jumpstart package you choose because we really believe that they're so essential. One notable thing about these foundational strategy elements is that they can have a shelf life beyond this year's campaign. For example, the key messages that we'll develop together at the start of our work, if you choose to work with us in one of these fundraising packages, can be used to inform your website content and all of your other materials for donors even in future years. And then your campaign strategy and dashboards can be used as starting points for your campaigns, not just this year, but in 2020 and beyond. Getting that first foundational strategy in place, especially if you haven't had time to develop one before, is a great starting point for just being more strategic about your future campaigns overall. So those strategy elements are how our fundraising Jumpstart packages are similar, but let's break down how they're different here for a moment. So our first Jumpstart package, as I mentioned, is called the Ready package, which in addition to everything included on the previous slide, those strategy elements includes a donation page copy and design for up to 6 emails. Those could be regular campaign emails, Giving Tuesday emails, acknowledgement emails. We can talk about what makes sense in your case. Includes social media posts that align with your campaign theme and calls to action, and social media imagery to ensure that your social profiles sync up with the rest of your campaign, which we've mentioned is really important. So the investment level for this first package is $10,000, and it's a great fit for organizations that have a decent list to work with and just want to run a basic digital campaign, or those that already have a direct mail program running and want to supplement it with some digital elements that Prosper would oversee and manage. The second Jumpstart package is the Ready Set package, and in addition to everything included in the Ready package, this package includes a new donor lead gen offer. And that's what we talked about before. We shared that example of the Give Back Guide that we developed for the McCormick Foundation that helped them acquire 1,100 new donor leads. We would come up with a similar piece of content that we could develop for you that would help donors feel comfortable giving over their contact information. This package also includes a set of 4 Facebook ads, which are essential for capturing those new donor leads, which we would set up and manage. And it includes a $1,000 starter budget for new donor lead acquisition on Facebook. We also add on 2 more emails in this package on top of the 6 in the previous package for a total of 8 emails. The investment for this package is $20,000, and this one is a great fit for organizations that don't quite have enough budget to run a full-fledged campaign with direct mail, but want to grow their list of potential donors and want to spend a bit more to do so. It's also a good fit for an organization that's already doing direct mail and wants to add in more robust digital elements, not just the digital basics, but sort of take things to the next level. And then finally, our highest level Jumpstart package is the Ready, Set, Go package, which is priced at $32,000. And this one includes everything in the Ready and the Ready Set packages, plus, importantly, design and copywriting for 2 direct mail appeal pieces and 1 direct mail acknowledgement piece. This package also includes the setup and management of a Google ad campaign that we'll use to help you retarget people who are already on your donor list with digital ads that keep your organization top of mind during giving season as they're traveling around the internet. They'll see ads for your organization. This package also includes a total of 8 emails. This one is a great fit for organizations with a slightly larger budget that want to reach donors both online and via direct mail in order to drive more donations. And it can also supplement other things that you're doing internally and add on to or align with existing direct mail or digital campaigns. No matter which package you choose, you will get from Prosper strategic support for your end-of-year fundraising campaign, professional copywriting and design services, and a dedicated campaign manager to oversee all elements of your campaign. And don't forget that those strategic elements that I really emphasize, the plan, messaging, and metrics dashboard are always included, whether you're at that first level at $10K, at $32K, or in the middle at $20K. Of course, if you don't see exactly what you need within these packages, we're always happy to talk to you about developing something custom. We can customize in small ways, like adding a few more emails or another direct mail piece, or in bigger ways by adding additional tactics, things like video or events. Really, the sky is the limit, and the timeline is the limit in this case since it's September. So feel free to reach out via our contact form or to email me directly. My contact information is in the chat box, which is separate from the questions box on GoToWebinar, and I'll share it in a follow-up email from today's webinar as well. So to learn more about these Jumpstart packages, share the information with others on your team, and then fill out a form to talk to us about getting started, just visit our landing page at prosper-strategies/jumpstart, or you can email me directly. I mentioned my email's in the chat box. It's alyssa@prosper-strategies.com. And because time is of the essence here, we've already noted just a few times throughout the webinar, oh my gosh, it's September already. We're increasing prices on all of our Jumpstart packages by $1,000 in just 20 days on September 24th. So make sure to reach out to us before that date to ensure you can take advantage of our current pricing and that you're getting going in a timely manner here. However, on the flip side, whether you move on this offer now or after the 24th, we are going to offer everyone who is on this webinar a discount of $250 to thank you for attending and being part of this discussion today. So just make sure you mention the webinar when you contact us. We have record of everyone who was on the line today. And our goal with all of the Jumpstart packages is to take the campaign development aspects of fundraising off your plate and help you take your campaign to the next level strategically. And even if you don't choose to work with us through one of these Jumpstart packages, our hope, absolutely, as I said at the top of the webinar, is that you'll walk away from today's session at least a little bit better equipped than you were before to run your most successful end-of-year campaign ever. So with that said, we'd like to spend the rest of this webinar taking your questions, both about the Jumpstart packages specifically and about all things end-of-year fundraising or fundraising generally. So go ahead and find the questions box if you would, and feel free to ask questions that apply to me, Alyssa, or to Noreen, or to both of us, and we'll take as many of them as we can, either until they stop coming in or up until 2:15 Central. All right, so I had a couple of questions come in throughout the webinar, and I'll wait for others to trickle in. Robin, you had asked, where can I find your marketing plan template? So on the GoToWebinar platform, there's a chat box. It's separate from the questions box, a little bit confusing, but there is a link to our marketing plan template within the chat box. I will also make sure to send around a link to that in the follow-up email that we'll send tomorrow with the recording of today's webinar. But if you are eager for it right now, you can go to our website if you can't find it in the chat box and find it right away. All right. Let's see. Jerry, you said you mentioned a checklist for direct mail campaigns. Will you offer a link to that checklist? I think you're probably referring to the checklist that we showed up on our screen of best practices for direct mail. Feel free to chat in if I'm missing what you're referring to, but that will be sent around. We'll send around the slides and the recording of today's webinar, so it will be within that. And if there's something more you're looking for, feel free to email. All right, a few more basic questions here. Sally asks, unfortunately, I was late. May I have access to the full webinar? Was it recorded? Yes, indeed. The full webinar was recorded. We will be sending it around sometime tomorrow, possibly today, but probably tomorrow following the session along with the slides. All right, Noreen, why don't we turn this one over to you since you've had some diverse experience in this. Jessica asks, when should end-of-year campaigns begin? And I'm guessing she's asking in terms of when should the first touch points arrive in donor mailboxes or email inboxes?
Sure. So last year with the McCormick Foundation, what we found to be really successful is to have direct mail drops and some emails in October, November, and December. We kind of sliced up in different ways, where October we really used as kind of a warm-up period to really explain and remind people of who we are, what we do, and how we can partner together to make Chicagoland a better place for everyone. So we kind of call that time stewtivation, which is kind of a combination of cultivation and stewardship. So we were thanking our donors that gave to us in the past and kind of reminding them that we're around. So then in November, we sent our first solicitation letter. So usually, the first couple weeks in November, that's when our direct mail would hit homes. Shortly after, we would then start with our email campaign. And then we would do a second mail drop in December. Usually, what we found actually, if we did a second mail drop, coinciding it with just after Giving Tuesday actually really worked well because people were still in kind of the giving mode. So that we found to be really good timing. And then, of course, with the end of the year with the tax date looming, a couple emails, even on the 30th and on the 31st, for kind of that last minute push for donations to come in is a really good idea too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. I think the ideal situation is exactly what Noreen just described. If you are struggling with, constraints on your timeline, there are lots of ways that you can make things work within a shorter or more condensed timeline that we can talk about. Okay, Kara would like to take your question next. This comes from Kara Page, who asks, can you talk more about the Facebook lead donor ads and how that works? So I'll speak to this, and then Noreen, if you have anything to add, feel free to chime in. But as I think Noreen mentioned when we started to talk through the section, this was sort of a new concept that we pioneered with the McCormick Foundation, and I'm not sure that a lot of other organizations are doing this. But just to kind of take it back to the why behind the Facebook lead donor ads and describe why we were doing it before I talk about how they work. The McCormick Foundation was experiencing what a lot of organizations, I think, are experiencing right now, just attrition in its donor base, especially as donors were aging. It's a fairly aging donor base, and donor demographics are shifting and changing, and there's just always a need, almost at every organization we've ever worked with, to continue to build that donor database. So we started to talk about and think about how can digital media be used as a tool to bring new donors into the fold. And we knew that it would be unlikely for us to acquire a list of new donors and cultivate them so quickly that they would give in that campaign year. But we wanted to think about how we could sync the end of year campaign giving period up with new donor acquisition, at least to get contact information for new potential donors who could then be nurtured over the period of the next couple of years. So that's where the Facebook lead donor ads came in. The first thing that's essential there, just reiterating some of what we said earlier in the webinar, is coming up with some sort of offer, whether that's a petition or a downloadable ebook or something like that, that's compelling enough that potential donors want to access enough in order to give over their contact information. But you can't just put that up on your website and, of course, expect people to find it. Of course, it's not a build it and they will come kind of thing. So that's where we bring Facebook lead ads into the mix. Facebook has a specific type of ad called a lead gen ad, and this was created for-profit organizations to acquire leads, sales leads essentially, but we've kind of found a way to use it for new donor acquisition purposes. We use those lead gen ads to advertise the offer. So in McCormick Foundation's case, the Give Back Guide was advertised to people who either looked similar to the existing donor base, but were maybe a little bit younger or had some slight nuances, and people who we thought had sort of the demographic profile of a likely potential future donor for the McCormick Foundation. So we advertised the Give Back Guide to them in ads that showed up in their newsfeed, on the sidebar of Facebook, and in the Facebook mobile app, and encouraged them to download the Guide to Doing Good and Giving Back because we knew it was something that this specific type of donor would be likely to care about. They cared about local impact. In order to get that guide, the person who was seeing the ad then had to enter their email address within the lead gen ad itself. So you can do this in different ways, but it's most seamless to just have the Facebook lead gen ad be the place that you have a little form, one field form, where potential donor enters their contact information. They're then redirected to download whatever the offer is. When that happens, that donor's contact information is stored essentially in Facebook in a spreadsheet that you can download. There's based on how the privacy policy is set up with these ads, you are then gaining that contact. You have ownership of that contact and you can continue to market to them. So you could put that into your donor database, drop them into your existing fundraising emails, or hang on to it for after your end of year fundraising campaign is over, and set up a kind of education and nurturing program to bring those new potential donors up to speed on what you do, and then put them into your donor database. Next year, there's a whole lot of possibilities there. But it's a really exciting opportunity, and one that I don't think a lot of organizations have started to think about or take advantage of yet. And there's just endless possibilities to target people on Facebook and get contact information that can help build your database. So, Kara, hopefully that answers your question. Noreen, anything to add there?
Yeah, just a couple things. You know, one thing that I loved about the Give Back Guide, which was hugely successful in my eyes, I think we honestly had a goal of 300 emails, maybe, and we blew it out of the water. Definitely something we weren't expected. It was a very pleasant surprise. And one thing was that using this type of tactic helped us get into new audiences. You know, we had older donors, but we needed to start really building our donor pipeline and acquiring these prospects that look different than the people that we were already having as donors. So it was a really great way to start a conversation with our donors. In addition to when a person gave us their contact information and they got the link to download the guide, we also right away sent them an email. So we already were starting to cultivate that relationship. So they also got an email that not only had a link to download the guide, but it also had kind of our social media channels to kind of follow us and become engaged that way.
Yeah, great point. And you may be surprised, and again, this is something that we just started to test out and experiment with last year, but you may be surprised at how those people stay in touch with you between, you know, initially becoming part of your database and your next end of your campaign, especially if you create opportunities for that engagement. And then, you know, remains to be seen how many of these donors, potential donors, turn into real donors, active donors this year. But we're excited about that opportunity and continuing to explore that with other nonprofits. All right, so this one comes from Gabriel, who asks, we typically run separate Giving Tuesday and end of year campaigns. With a later Giving Tuesday this year, how would you handle or schedule the potential overlap between these two initiatives? So, Noreen, I know you typically treated Giving Tuesday as a part of the overall end of year program. Do you want to talk a little bit about the thinking behind that?
Yeah, you know, I've always thought of Giving Tuesday as another opportunity to give during your end of year campaign kind of time frame. So for me, you know, I think it's really important to give different types of offers for donors to kind of grab onto. So Giving Tuesday was a really great way to grab the attention of the people we particularly weren't grabbing attention with our end of year campaign messaging. In our case, our Giving Tuesday kind of pull was that additional match. So we made it special. So our Giving Tuesday campaign still was about opportunity. It still had the end of year campaign themes. We just gave it kind of a Giving Tuesday switch look to make it relevant for the day and to make it stand out to people who weren't necessarily paying attention to us.
Yeah, and you talked about it being a later Giving Tuesday this year too. I don't know that necessarily changes things at all. The only difference might be that a donor or potential donor will have received more communication from you before Giving Tuesday.
And I think that's fine. I would just suggest that since Giving Tuesday is in December this year, to really make sure if you're doing a direct mail piece afterwards, for it to hit after that time frame.
Absolutely. Yeah, so just kind of looking at the calendar and getting very clear on your dates and how direct mail overlaps with anything digital that you might do, since Giving Tuesday does tend to be more digital in nature, that the timing and sequencing is spot on. Okay, I like this question from Edward. I think we can both speak to this. Edward asks, how realistic is it to expect one person to run a successful end of year campaign? And I think the unfortunate answer to that question, Edward, is really it depends, but usually it's not very realistic. So the organizations that are successful at this typically are those that have a relatively small or achievable based on the size of the organization end of year goal, and that have someone who during the end of year fundraising period and really from now through the end of the year can be fully dedicated to this effort. It's really, really tough for one person to both run a successful end of year campaign and do the other jobs that fundraising typically requires in smaller organizations where this might be the setup. It's not to say that it can't be done. It certainly can, but I think there are some real challenges that go along with the one-person team, specifically when you get into some of those roles that we talked about when we talked about the dream team around administrative support and design and copywriting and that sort of thing. So some suggestions for you. Definitely in a situation like yours, one person is going to have to wear a whole bunch of hats. But think about what are 2 or 3 hats that potentially can be delegated either to someone else within the organization or outsourced to a freelancer or an agency like Prosper if budget allows. If none of that is going to be possible and it's really essential that one person runs a successful end of year campaign on their own, think about how that person's plate can be cleared so that they can focus only there, and then be really realistic about your goals, what you're engaging in, and really focus on the essentials. Noreen, I don't know if you have anything else to add there. You've always been a little larger teams, but not huge teams for end of year campaigns.
Sure. So, I think this is very common with a lot of nonprofits where one person is running their end of year campaign. And, my advice is to just have realistic expectations. Maybe just if you're able to do a direct mail, if that's kind of still your bread and butter, do a direct mail piece and be timely with your emails. Maybe just do 1 or 2 around Giving Tuesday or just 1 at the end of the year. Really kind of take the full scope of your work because, I think just being in a good space for your end of year campaign will just help you be successful. Also, another help that we had internally is we leaned on our communications and marketing team.
Yeah.
So there are only really 2 of us on our development team doing this with Prosper, and we had some help with our communication folks. So they were really able to help us with email execution and kind of the social media aspect of things too.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a really great approach to take. Absolutely, there should be some overlap between communications and fundraising. A large part of a fundraising campaign is communications, right? So think about how you might work together. I like that tip a lot, but Edward, don't fear if you're in this situation or if someone on your team is. It can be done. It's just really about getting smart about what you're doing and realistic. Okay, well, unless I see any other questions come in the next 30 seconds or so, we are going to close things out today. Thank you all so much for the great questions. Don't have much more time left, so I'd like to share just a few ways to go deeper with this material today and the material that we've been sharing on our series overall. So if you've been on a few of our recent webinars, you probably know that we recently launched a closed Facebook group that we are hoping will continue to build and serve as a community for those of you who have been finding value in our webinar series, as well as for the wider world of nonprofit leaders and fundraisers and communicators. It's called the Nonprofit Marketing Collaborative, and you can find the URL on your screen and in the chat box. We'll also send that in the follow-up email, and we hope that you will join us there. And second, we're excited to continue to have conversations like these. We actually, like I mentioned, have 2 webinars this month. So the next one is coming up in just a few weeks. On September 18th, we are going to discuss the role that marketing, communications, and storytelling can play in advancing your nonprofit's goals around equity and inclusion. Really important topic to us at Prosper Strategies, and I know many of you who are on this webinar or have been on past ones. So for this conversation, we will be joined by Dory McWhorter. She is the CEO of YWCA of Metropolitan Chicago and has a lot of really great thoughts about the direction that the sector can move in terms of the relationship between marketing and equity and inclusion. So you can register for that webinar and all of our other upcoming webinars at prosper-strategies.com/webinars, which you'll find a link to in the chat box and in your follow-up email. And just as a reminder, if you're interested in checking out our fundraising jumpstart packages, you can find them at prosper-strategies/jumpstart. There you can fill out a form to get started, just to have a conversation with us, no pressure, or you can email me directly. Just make sure you get in touch before September 24th when our pricing goes up, and don't forget to mention this webinar to get $250 off. So with that said, we will go ahead and close out. Thank you again, Noreen, for being here today and for all of the insights you shared. Until next time, everyone, best of luck with everything you're working on, end of year fundraising or otherwise. And if you need to get in touch, here's where to find me. Stay tuned for the recording and we will talk to you soon. Have a great rest of your day.